Welcome to my channel. Today I'll be showing you how to make a vegan golden black chocolate cake. My channel is called Lily and Peony. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's start with the batter. I have some non-dairy milk that I added apple cider vinegar to. I mix this together and set it aside. Then in a large bowl, I mix the dry ingredient, which is flour, baking powder, baking soda, and some salt. I also add in the sugar and cacao powder. I mix these dry ingredients thoroughly and make sure they're incorporated together. Then I add in some sunflower oil and some maple syrup. And also a little bit of coffee. I mix these together so that they become a little bit sand-like consistency. Once I get there, I add in my milk mixture from earlier. I mix this together. I am folding it mostly. I don't want to overmix, but I also want to make sure I mix enough. Next, I get my 3 6-inch greased and lined tins out, and after putting in the batter, I make sure I tap to get all the air out. Then I work on my buttercream. This is buttercream that I made previously, and it's the exact ingredients and method from all my previous videos, so do check that out if you want more details. To my buttercream, I add some super black paste to it. I add this gradually so that I can determine the consistency and also determine the color. Please make sure that you don't add too much black in one go. For the Americolor Super Black Paste, there are some things you'll need to consider. Do add more gradually, don't add too much in one go. To achieve the black, you'll also have to add quite a bit of this paste. And when it turns gray, let it oxidize and turn black itself. Using too much of this will alter the taste of your buttercream. And lastly, this will stain your tongue, but it does come off quickly, so don't worry too much. As you can see here, I continued to add a little bit more gradually until it got to my desired color. In between, I also did let it sit and oxidize a little. Next, I'm going to assemble the cake. I have a bench scraper and an offset spatula and a cake board. I start with placing my cake board and putting a tiny little bit of the buttercream on the cake board. What this does is it will help secure the cake and so that the cake won't move around. Once I put enough, I start with my first layer. This cake actually baked really well, but it did have a little bit of dome, so I cut off the dome. And I start the first layer by putting some buttercream on top of the layer. I get an even coat, a flat, even coat. Then I move on to the next layer. Again, I'm doing the same thing. I make sure it's placed properly well in the middle. And I put some buttercream on top and make sure I get it all over. It's even and it's flat. Do note that I only touch the buttercream. It's important not to touch the cake. You only want to touch the buttercream and spread it around. Finally, I move on to the third and last layer. I flip the cake upside down. I have the flat bottom part on the top. This will help me buttercream my cake much easier and the final outcome looks a lot nicer. Once again, I put some buttercream on the top, I spread that around, I even it out, and I do the sides as well. I continue putting buttercream on the side until I have everything covered. This is my first layer. It's the crumb coat. I also make sure I scrape off any excess. The whole point of this is to seal in the crumb, so you don't need too much buttercream. Put this in the freezer for an hour to chill. Then onto the second layer. Add some buttercream to the side. For the second layer, I always like to add a lot of buttercream because afterwards it's easy to scrape off. And by doing that, you really can achieve a smooth surface. Do go back in and add in more buttercream to any holes that you see, like I'm doing right now. And continue doing this until you're happy. Do also touch up your board and clean it up from time to time. Then I use a scraper and slowly scrape off any excess. I do go back in when I see some holes and add more buttercream to those holes before I start scraping it again. Then try and use as long a stroke as you possibly can and as light a hand as you can to scrape off any excess. Continue this until you're happy. Do take as long as you need. Once I'm happy, I also like to do an extra step. You see this in all my videos. I basically like to clean my scraper and wipe it off with a kitchen towel and go back and scrape my cake. I try and keep my scraper as clean as possible. What this does is really helps me and gives me a very smooth surface. Once I'm happy with the side, I do the top as well, and the second layer is done. Before I put this in the freezer to firm up again, I also take a spatula and a wet paper towel and very carefully wipe off any excess that's on my board. Do be careful here and be very gentle. For the decorations, I have my dark chocolate and vegetable shortening mixture ready and a spatula. I start with putting a little dollop, a little drip to test the consistency, and I was happy with mine, so I continued pouring some all over the top and spreading it out with my spatula. Some of the spreading out with the spatula created more drips, but I found that it wasn't enough, so I made some more. I just ran around the cake and dripped where I felt like there was a need for it. I scraped off any excess chocolate. I basically continued dripping and scraping off chocolate until I was happy with the effect. I also mix some black sparkle into a small bowl so that I can drip it around the base of the cake. Once I got an even amount, I use my offset spatula to very gently push it in. Be careful not to touch the buttercream. Just be very gentle and patient and gradually push it into the cake. The last step of the decoration is the gold that goes all over the cake. So in a small bowl, I am mixing some luster dust with lemon juice so that I can paint it onto the cake. I found that the initial amount of luster dust I put in wasn't enough, so I continued adding more until I felt I had enough. Once I got the consistency I wanted, I started painting on my cake. My cake has been chilling in the fridge for a little while because I wanted the chocolate to firm up, and therefore it was a lot easier to paint. I like to paint in one direction. Try and keep your strokes in one direction as much as possible. I started with the top, then I moved on to the drips with a smaller brush. After my first layer of gold is completely dried, I did a second layer exactly the same way as the first, but I just wanted to make sure my gold popped. That's why I did 2 layers. I also put a little bit of gold, as you can see here, on my sparkles at the bottom of the cake as well. I wanted to make sure there was a little bit more gold at the bottom as well as the top. I had some vegan chocolate, and oh my god, these are so yummy. I painted these gold as well so that I can put them on top of the cake and they will be cohesive with the decoration idea that I'm going for. I also had some silver beads. I didn't have any gold ones, and therefore I put a few beads into my gold color mixture and swirl them around in there for a little bit and turn them gold. I tried to put my chocolate pieces on top of the cake, but because of the chocolate ganache drip layer that's on top of my cake, I actually had to stab my cake first in order to get my chocolate pieces into the cake. It was a little scary to stab the cake, but it turned out quite nice, so that's okay. I used the gold paint in areas where I felt like there was a little bit of a need to, and then I also put my beads onto the cake, and voila, the cake is done. Thank you so much for watching.